What are geriatric Zhongli's biggest pros and cons? That's what I'm here to tell you today. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. Okay, so, his pull value these days is pretty questionable, but I'll tear into his cons later. I would say that to this day, his amazing shields do still very much hold up. If you want a character that is purely defensive and is purely able to help you tank a ton of damage, Zhongli is still able to do that. It is easily his best quality. If you need a strong shield, Zhongli still offers that in spades. He is still an amazing comfort character if all you want is to be able to just ignore damage, and he is indeed still very useful in just being able to cruise through the game without really having to worry about dodging or anything like that. It's a pretty common joke among people who use the guy regularly that they got worse at the game because they stopped dodging or they stopped attempting to dodge because they're able to just use this character and avoid the need altogether, and I would say that that still holds up even now. If all you're looking for is a super strong sustain, Zhongli is able to do that for you. He is really good at that job, and I personally find that if all you want is to tank, he is still a very good tank. Because while he does have some minor buffing in his kit, and he does have his meteor which you can build for damage, first of all, building his meteor for damage is just not worth it, not only because of his long ult animation, but because these days the damage just really isn't all that impressive, and second of all, the main reason you're getting him is the shielding. Any buffs that he's able to provide is simply a nice small bonus on the side. You really just get him because he's an amazing shielder, and this just hasn't changed. If we evaluate shielders only on their ability to shield damage, then he still remains as the best shielder in the game. I specify that because obviously characters like Inefa and Sitlolly are more meta than him, but if we're just looking at pure tankiness, yes, he is still going to fit the bill just fine. Another thing is that, while I usually don't like to highlight a character's flexibility as being some major pro for them, unless their flexibility is actually useful, in Zhongli's case, you're using him so that you can avoid taking damage, and he's able to work in basically every setup. So generally speaking with him, it does count as a positive quality, because no matter who you main, you're going to be able to stick him on the end and just avoid taking damage. Now I will say that there is one situation in which that doesn't apply, and that's if you have our dearest Hydra Warcon in your team, because she drains HP, and Zhongli of course, he doesn't heal unless you have him at C6, which if you have C6 Zhongli, I respect the dedication, you massive simp. However, that aside, if you're playing Lady Farina in a team, chances are you've already sorted out a healer for that team, so that generally shouldn't be a problem, but all things considered, you're usually going to be playing healers anyway. However, for the most part, as long as you're not using our dearest Hydra Warcon on the team, you are easily able to just use Zhongli on the end. And besides, it is also realistic to use our dearest Hydra Warcon and Zhongli in the same team. It just doesn't really happen very often because, like I said, most of the time you'd be using a healer instead, and that's going to cover your sustain needs. However, something like Settle Down, Lady Farina, Shilunen or Kazuha, and then of course Zhongli on the end can work. It's just like I said, there's not really much reason to do it. But you can do it. That is a thing you can very much do and it will work. So while there is a caveat to it, for the most part, you are able to just stick him wherever and he's going to work. And obviously in the overworld, he is going to be very, very comfortable. I personally find that in the overworld, you're not really going to be taking much damage anyway once you get to a certain point because you're going to kill enemies so quickly. But if you just want that additional layer of comfort, or you just want to be protected from, say, random things that can hurt you in the overworld, like explosions and whatnot, yes, he is indeed able to protect you from that. Another thing is that he's also an incredibly cheap unit. Now, this is somewhat of a double-edged sword, which I'll get onto later, but for now, all you need to know is that you can pull him at C0R0, and there is legitimately no need to pull any high Primogem-based investment for him. Now, his biggest simps might get some of his Constellations, or maybe a Staff of Homa for him if they care about his personal damage. I'm gonna be honest, his personal damage really isn't worth investing into, especially these days. It was already questionable to do so before, but I suppose I could see it, but these days it's just like, no, I really wouldn't recommend it. I mean, you could do it if you want to, it's just a big waste of resources. So, all things considered, he is a very cheap character to play. You don't really have to invest anything into him. He is extremely free-to-play friendly, as free-to-play friendly as it gets, to be honest. And you literally only have to slap HP on him and he's gonna get the job done just fine. I did also mention earlier that he has some small buffs within his kit, and that is true. For instance, 20% Universal Red Shred. That's honestly pretty good, especially considering that it applies to both Geo characters and Animo characters. This doesn't really make him worth using over other potential 4th slots that are able to buff. However, It's still a nice bonus that helps you feel like you're not missing out on damage completely. You are still missing out on a lot of damage when using this guy, but either way, it's a nice way to have him not only provide shielding and have something else that he can do. You can also stick him on supportive sets. Noblesse I'm not the biggest fan of because it requires him using his burst, which has a really long animation. However, you can also put something like tenacity on him, that's also going to be good. You have options. Or you could just go 2-piece HP percent on both 2 pieces. And really stack up that meaty shield of his. And then you can easily stick him on a Favonius Lance because there's not really any other weapon option that you should be using on him. So by doing that, you're able to generate some more white particles for your team. So he is still able to provide some small benefits for you outside of shielding. However, it is about time that we tear into his cons because unfortunately, this guy doesn't really have that much pull value. Depending on who you are, the thing is, he does very much have some objective negatives, which I'm going to get into. But I do want to preface this by saying his value is subjective in the sense that it depends on how bad you are at the game, and it also depends on another thing. Do you think you would benefit from this character if you have a really laggy device or if you play on mobile? Here's the thing, when I first got into Genshin Impact, I actually played it on my iPad for a year, so I am incredibly accustomed to the mobile experience. So, to mobile players, is he worth it? If your device is super laggy and enemies load in really late for you, or you just have a really hard time dodging, I do think that you're gonna feel like he's a bit of a lifesaver in that sense. I personally didn't have a laggy device, because my iPad generally ran Genshin quite well, so because of that, while I did pull for Zhongli and I used him in my Hu Tao teams a lot, I didn't necessarily feel like he was a must. I did use him for quite a while on the team because he used to be one of the best options, but I honestly found myself using him more for the res pen more than anything else. And I played C0 Hu Tao, mind you. I didn't really find much issue. Now, I will say that, like I said, my iPad ran really well, and another thing is that enemies were also just easier to deal with before. We have enemies that hit harder these days. But I would say that if you're a phone user, or if you're somebody that has a laggy mobile device, that actually does end up increasing his pull value, because he's going to be able to help you out because you're just not going to be able to dodge as easily. Yes, that is unironically a pull consideration for you then. However, if you're on a mobile device that's a bit bigger, and you're not that bad at dodging, or your device just runs really well, like in my case, you don't really need to get him anymore. Like, he is a good pull for you, and I would say that he is better for mobile players than he's going to be for PC players. But it kind of depends on how your device runs. So I will say that is unironically a consideration. Also consider Overworld. If you've ever lagged your way into like exploding a barrel or something, maybe he's gonna feel nice and convenient for those types of situations. Another thing is that some people have said that Zhongli totally transformed their experience playing Genshin because it was so nice to have a character that they could just turn their mind off with. And I would say that if you want that, that's not a bad thing at all, and Zhongli does provide you with that experience. So this is why I say that objectively speaking, his value isn't that high for reasons that I'm about to get into, but I just wanted to express that Zhongli's value at the end of the day can be very subjective, and how useful he's going to be is still going to heavily depend on yourself. So there's just a couple of questions you want to ask yourself. How well does your device run? Do you want the comfort? And do you think he's cool? That last one is very important, of course. Okay, so he's obviously going to cost you quite a lot of damage because while he does provide you with some buffs, it just doesn't really compare to what other 4th Salt teammates are able to provide you. Like in that Novalet team that I mentioned earlier, even just sticking Fischl there is going to be more efficient, and even then there are multiple different characters that you could put there that would be better. I mean, I said Kazuha or Shilonen. Dude, just put Kazuha and Shilonen, there you go. All around, you just have other options in most of the teams in which he's able to work. I mean, that's a given, and I feel like whenever you get Zhongli, you kind of go in with the knowledge that this character is not really a unit that I'm pulling to do damage. You're pulling him for comfort, but you just need to be acutely aware of that, because he is going to be tanking your damage quite a bit, because you could be taking another character that's able to buff up your team instead. And of course, consider how characters like Shilonen are able to heal and buff. We're getting more and more packed kits as time goes on, and Zhongli just kind of seems less and less valuable over time. So I feel like you just have to acknowledge whenever you add him to a team, you are trading damage for comfort. Acknowledge that. You're still going to be able to clear with him in your team, just note that it's a bit of a handicap and the buffs he provides don't really make up for the fact that he is primarily a shielder. That is the main reason you're going to be using him, especially whenever you consider the shielders that are releasing now, they generally do quite a bit. Sitlali is a really good melt support. Inefa was obviously designed for Flynn's, and outside of that is also just a really good electrocharge teammate. You get the gist. Shielders are just doing more now. They are more niche than Zhongli, that is true. However, all around, he does still cost you quite a bit of damage, so keep that in mind. And please, I beg of you, unless you're his biggest simp, just don't build him for damage. Outside of pure Geo teams, it's nothing impressive, and even in pure Geo teams, it's nothing impressive. His damage is not really all that. Another thing is that healers are just kind of better. Now, obviously, this is starting to shift a little bit with characters like Ineffa and Sitlolly, and we are getting less and less characters that want to use our dearest Hydro Archon these days. But for the most part, we just have a lot of strong healer options if you're playing Lady Farina in a team, and if you're not playing her, well then the shielders that are coming out are quite specialized for their respective teams. And if a new shielder needs to be released for a specific character, Hoiverse is just going to do that. They will just make a new shielder that is really good for that particular team. It happened with Ineffa after all. Even though our dearest Lady Farina still ends up being best in slot for Flynn's, I suppose Hoiverse's idea was that they didn't really want a healer to be best in slot for Flynn's to try and reduce our beloved Lady Farina's value a bit, which obviously didn't end up working out, but either way, that's why Ineffa ended up being a shielder, and she's a very good shielder for Flynn's teams and basically acts as his only viable sustain at the minute. And a lot of healers just provide more. Shieldon speaks for herself. She is broken right now, one of the best characters in the game meta-wise. And of course, you have other characters like Shanyan, who's literally able to open up an entirely different playstyle for you, even if she's not particularly top meta anymore. So with that in mind, Zhongli's pull value just seems kind of sparse in comparison. Another thing is that his Constellations are just awful. This guy has no good high primogen based investment, unlike a lot of other sustains that are releasing these days, funnily enough. A lot of current day sustains have really good Constellations that can provide really nice upgrades to your team. Zhongli just doesn't have that. His Constellations are kind of useless, to be honest. I really wouldn't recommend them. They are so underwhelming for what you get. Genuinely, early Constellations are something to marvel at with how useless they are. It is ridiculous. And another thing is that he kind of just doesn't really offer much. This character is old, dude. Compared to current day sustains that have so much packed into their kit, you're just not really getting that many features out of him. Now, obviously, a bunch of features doesn't really mean much as long as they're good at one or two particular things, but you get the point. I've already went over how most current healers and shielders are able to provide some kind of damage or even more buffing or are more niche, really good for specific meta teams, all that good stuff. Zhongli just doesn't offer much in comparison. Now, like I said, this is going to be completely different for people that play Genshin on laggy devices. He is unironically going to be more valuable to those types of people. But if we're just trying to keep things objective here, then he doesn't offer much. Now, I will say that his value is so subjective, and it's really hard to coin his value as being one specific thing because his value is going to mean something different to everyone, and I appreciate that. Like to me, who's been playing this game for a really long time, obviously his value doesn't really mean much to me anymore, especially because I'm a C6 Farina main and she just kind of heals herself. So that just kind of works itself out, doesn't it? But there is such a large crowd of people that's really going to appreciate what Zhongli is able to bring to them, so I'm going to say this. His value is objectively low, and I do think you should skip him in the modern day if you're looking at this from a purely objective standpoint. However, if A, you just think he's hot or something, which, yeah, fair enough, I get it, or B, you're just someone that has a really laggy device, or you don't even need a laggy device. Maybe you just don't like dodging, or you just don't like playing hardcore, and that is also completely valid, because I think that you're still going to be able to clear fine as long as you invest a little more into your DPSs. He is going to tank your damage, sure, but it's not such an abysmal decrease that it's literally better to just not have a 4th slot teammate. He is very comfortable, and that is really going to help out some people. After all, if you're constantly getting hit or dying, you're not going to be able to deal damage to the enemies in the first place. And if it really is that much of an issue for you, he is able to help you with that. And while I do believe that we have other options these days that are able to help with that, he's able to reduce any sort of interruption that you could receive, he's going to be very comfortable to use, and he's also just really damn cheap, which makes him super accessible. So he has his appeal, and I really want to emphasize that even though he is objectively not high value anymore, it really depends. So just ask yourself if his individual value would mean anything to you, and if not, you can skip him safely. Of course, I would understand just pulling him because he's the Geo Archon and because he looks really cool. He is probably one of the most iconic characters in Genshin Impact. People love his trailer. Literally go to his trailer now and sort the comments by new. There are still people that go back to it. It's really cool to see. But all around, objectively, not that high value. Subjectively, depends. Hopefully this video was able to tell you Zhongli's biggest pros and cons. This has been Juice, signing out. And I do not wish for people to waste their pulls. But I cannot watch the skill issued suffer!